Ever wondered how a board game could make you rich? Let's dive into Ted Strokes' incredible journey. Ted Strokes is no ordinary billionaire. Co-host of the world's top TV station, Young Elder TV, Ted is a powerhouse of knowledge and experience. With a net worth of $7.1 billion, he's not just a stock investor expert, but also an award-winning author and real estate mogul. Ted's journey to success is as riveting as a game of Monopoly, literally. He's traveled the globe, established businesses in multiple countries, and now he's sharing his secrets with us. On Young Elder TV, Ted teaches how he leveraged the strategies from the board game Monopoly to build his empire. So if you're an entrepreneur eager to turn your dreams into reality, tune in and learn from the Monopoly master himself. Ted Strokes is here to show you that the game of life can indeed make you a winner. Ready to roll the dice? Let's go.
What's going on, Young Elder Gang? Hit that like button and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more bangers. Hit that bell. Check back with us every day for new content. The Young Elder, a good friend of mine, invited me to be a co-host on his show. I'm billionaire Ted Strokes. The ladies call me T-Strokes. I made my first million at the age of 19 years old. In this video, I will discuss how I became a billionaire, using the analogies I learned from Monopoly, such as marketing, real estate, property management, industry, stock market, investing, money management, real life and business. I'm 43 now, and my net worth is $7.1 billion. I have been listed in Forbes many times. I'm from Woodside, California. I grew up poor. My mother and my father both worked, but it was never enough to get us out of the condition we were in, which was poverty. What is poverty? Poverty is a human condition that occurs when someone doesn't have enough money or resources to meet their basic needs and participate in society. I didn't understand poverty and why some people have billions of dollars, then some people are broke and poor. I figured out there are 4 global causes for poverty. The first is to recognize the impact of structural inequalities within societies. These inequalities create disparities in access to resources, opportunities, and decision-making power, and addressing them is essential for breaking the cycle of poverty. 2. Educational opportunities serve as a gateway out of poverty. Yet millions encounter barriers such as inadequate infrastructure, gender-based discrimination, and economic constraints. Bridging the global education gap is vital for empowering communities and eliminating global poverty. We must ensure that every child goes to school and thrives in the educational environment, and actively commit to breaking down barriers and creating a pathway for a brighter future. We need reconstruction of the educational system, due to it being sabotaged by the elite bankers. It was set up to create employees and not owners or entrepreneurs. The third thing is unfair economic systems contribute significantly to global poverty. Exploitative labor practices, unequal distribution of wealth, and limited access to credit and resources hinder the economic progress of vulnerable populations. Addressing these economic injustices is critical to a sustainable poverty solution. The fourth thing is that marginalized social groups often bear the brunt of poverty's weight disproportionately. In our pursuit of a world where everyone has a so-called equal opportunity to thrive, combating social discrimination and fostering inclusivity becomes imperative. At the core of our mission lies the commitment to helping families thrive. We recognize that they are the heartbeat of flourishing communities. So, when I was a kid, I said to myself, I will make it out of this poverty cycle. There was one advantage that I had, that my father was a teacher at a private school. Because of this, I was able to go there for free. Most of the kids that attended this school were rich kids. Their parents were owners of major businesses. My father was the type of guy who didn't care much about money. He grew up in a small country town in West Virginia. He was part of the good old church folk who believed money is the root of all evil. I met rich friends at this school. One of my friends' name was Josh Cohen. His dad owned a lot of hotels and rental properties. My other friend, Mark Abelman, his dad owned railroad companies and utility companies. My friend Wes Goldberg, his dad owned prisons. Can you believe that? I didn't know prisons could be privately owned. Private prisons, also known as for-profit prisons, are facilities operated by private companies that contract with government agencies to house prisoners. The government pays the company a per diem or monthly rate for each prisoner in the facility or for each available space, whether occupied or not. Private prisons are operated with the intention of making a profit, and their contracts are based on the number of inmates and the length of time they serve. One day I overheard Mr., or should I say Dr. Goldberg, speaking about the prisons he owned. He said it's big business. He also owned 2 hospitals. Seeing all my friends with nice things and always getting new stuff before it came out, I always thought, why don't my dad own anything, so we can live like these people do? One day I decided to ask my dad, why don't they teach us about money in school? He replied saying, because the government doesn't let teachers teach that subject. The government tells us what we can teach and what we can't teach. Plus, he used to say money isn't real. For 19 years I watched my father work his fingers off, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. He didn't care as long as we were happy, but in the end, he didn't make enough, and slowly but surely lost everything. We were bankrupt. It took me a while to understand what bankruptcy was. Bankruptcy is a legal process that helps people who can't pay their debts, or debtors, get relief. It can also help creditors get paid from the debtor's assets. My dad used to always say, money isn't everything, Ted. I thought to myself, yes, but those who have it seem like they have everything. Meanwhile, before we became bankrupt, I used to ask my father, since they won't teach us about money at school, could you teach me at home about money? He said, Ted, I don't know much about money. I am just an employee, not an entrepreneur. He said, if you want to learn about money, you should speak with your friend's dad. They're entrepreneurs. So I took my dad's advice. I used to go play with my friend Josh Cohen at his dad's office. One day, I decided to go in his office and ask him, could he teach me about money? At first, he said, hey kid, get out of here, beat it. He was a Jewish businessman who had already made millions and didn't like people that wasn't talking business to take up his time. He used to say time is money and money is time. Well, being the type of guy that never gives up. From time to time, I would stop in and ask him, could he teach me about money? After so many times of harassing the guy, he finally said, come in and sit down. He said, you see, Ted, when dealing with money, there are 3 things you want to know. I said, what's that? He said, rule number 1, master currency and economics, Ted. Currency and economics are the key words here. He said, give me control over a nation's currency and economics. I care not who makes its laws and run their government and political arenas. Economics is a social science that studies the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. Economics focuses on the behavior and interactions of economic agents and how economies work. A currency is a standardization of money in any form, in use or circulation as a medium of exchange, for example, banknotes and coins. A more general definition is that a currency is a system of money in common use within a specific environment over time, especially for people in a nation-state. Then he said, number 2 is you never want a paycheck. Understand that. The moment you accept a paycheck, you start thinking like an employee. He says that's the trap. Entrepreneurs work for free. And last but not least, study the board game Monopoly. He said, what he's doing now and the wealth he accumulated, he learned from playing that game. Then there was a brief silence in the room. I said, is that it? He said, yes, kid, that's it. I charge $200 a minute for my time, and you took up 5 minutes, which comes out to be $1,000. Do you have that type of scratch laying around, kid? I said, no, I don't. He said, well, this one is on the house. Now scram, kid, get out of here, beat it. I left that office with all of what he said on my mind. The Monopoly thing stuck because as a kid, I loved board games. I remember those cozy evenings gathered around the table at my grandmother's house, the warmth of family surrounding you, the soft hum of conversation, and the anticipation that filled the air as the Monopoly board was laid out. You see, every fall break, doing Thanksgivings and Christmas breaks, me and my cousins would go to my grandparents' house to spend time. We loved to go there, to the farm, where my dad grew up in West Virginia. My grandmother was a retired teacher and an accountant, who still worked part-time making money, helping people fill out their tax returns. I guess you can say she was a numbers type of gal. My grandmother is the one who taught me and my cousins how to play the game of Monopoly. Our grandmother, a savvy woman who knew the value of $1, was our mentor during these game nights. She wasn't just playing to win, she was playing to teach. She used the game as a tool to impart wisdom that would last a lifetime. Those game nights were her classroom, and the Monopoly board was her blackboard. She used those moments to instill in me the fundamental principles of finance, principles that would guide me long after the game was over. She taught me the power of acquisition, the importance of owning assets. Every property I bought in the game was a lesson in investment, a step towards understanding how to build wealth. She also emphasized the importance of strategic decision-making. Every move had to be thought out, every purchase weighed carefully. It wasn't just about buying properties. It was about making the right choices at the right time. And then there was the delicate balance between risk and reward. Rolling the dice was a gamble, a risk that could lead to great rewards or significant losses. She taught me to assess risks, to understand when to take a chance and when to play it safe. "Every property you buy, Ted, is an investment in your future," she would say, her voice filled with the wisdom of years. Those words were more than just advice. They were a guiding principle that would shape my approach to money and life. Her words resonated deeply, shaping my understanding of money and setting the stage for my financial journey. They were the seeds of knowledge that would grow into a lifelong pursuit of financial literacy and success. Those early lessons weren't about becoming a millionaire. They were about understanding the value of money, the importance of making informed decisions, and the power of planning for the future. Counting Monopoly money was more than just a game mechanic. It was a lesson in budgeting and resource management. It taught me to keep track of my finances, to understand where my money was going and how to make it work for me. Discussing strategy with my family was a lesson in collaboration and negotiation. It taught me the importance of communication, of listening to others and working together to achieve a common goal. Little did I know, these seemingly simple concepts would become the bedrock of my future success. They were the foundation upon which I would build my career, my financial independence, and my understanding of the world. Monopoly nights were more than just a game. They were a formative experience that shaped who I am today. As I grew older, I realized that the lessons I learned during those Monopoly nights were universal. They applied not just to the game, but to life itself. The principles of acquisition, strategic decision-making, and risk management were the same principles that guided successful businesses and individuals. Today, as I stand before audiences and share my journey, I often reflect on those early lessons. I share the wisdom my grandmother imparted to me, hoping to inspire others to take control of their financial futures. In my books and seminars, I delve deeper into these concepts, breaking them down into actionable steps that anyone can follow. The goal is to make financial literacy accessible to everyone, to empower individuals to make informed decisions and achieve their financial goals. Mentoring young entrepreneurs, I see the same spark of curiosity and ambition that I had as a child. I encourage them to embrace the lessons of Monopoly, to understand the value of money, the importance of planning, and the power of making informed decisions. Looking back, I'm grateful for those Monopoly nights and the wisdom they brought into my life. They were more than just a game. They were a gateway to understanding the complexities of finance and the importance of making smart choices. And as I pass on these lessons to my own children, I hope they too will find joy and wisdom in the game, just as I did. Monopoly nights were a cherished part of my childhood, and they continue to be a source of inspiration and learning for me and my family. So, the next time you gather around the table for a game of Monopoly, remember that it's more than just a game. It's an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to connect with those you love. It's a chance to pass on valuable lessons and create lasting memories. Monopoly nights are a tradition worth keeping, a timeless way to impart wisdom and enjoy the company of family and friends. Those nights were more than just a pastime. They were a tradition, a ritual that brought us together. The thrill of rolling the dice, the clatter as they hit the board, and the sweet taste of victory, or the sting of defeat, were all part of the experience. Each roll was a new opportunity, a new chance to change your fate in the game. For me, Monopoly wasn't just a game, it was an education. It was a microcosm of the real world, a place where I could learn about money, strategy, and the consequences of my decisions in a safe, controlled environment. At my grandmother's house, we had Monopoly marathons, when I would play with my grandmother and 3 cousins. Each of them had a unique strategy and personality when they played Monopoly. Me, I was 9 years old at the time. I always picked the hat. My strategy was to wait and land on the high-end properties such as Boardwalk and Park Place, then proceed to put hotels on them. In Monopoly, the most valuable properties are Boardwalk and Park Place, which represent the highest real estate values. My grandmother always used the thimble. The thimble represents domesticity, humility, and industriousness. The thimble was a possession or tool of the poor. My grandmother's unique strategy was that she understood that the name of the game is to acquire. She would accumulate everything she could, and eventually she became the master of the board. My cousin Katie, who is 11, she is always the dog. She plays entirely for chance and community chess cards. You can say that she uses the luck strategy. My 10-year-old cousin Fat Sam is always the car. He is a very strategic player. He buys all of the railroads and all of the utilities, and then proceeds to put houses and hotels on the most expensive properties. He's a very savvy businessman. And then his younger brother, my other cousin Logan, who is 7, he buys everything that he lands on with no exception, which is fitting because he is the wheelbarrow. Now you got an idea on the type of players and their unique strategy, which I will break down in more detail later throughout this lecture. Now I have an uncle named Uncle Ronnie. He's my dad's younger brother. We call him Uncle Run for short. He had a different perspective on money than my dad. Uncle Ronnie would come by the farm from time to time to help out our grandfather, his dad. He still lived in West Virginia. He never played Monopoly with us, but would just pop in from time to time observing. Every time he would come by, he would give us a little bit of his game, wise words and extravagant quotes. Uncle Ronnie was the coolest guy around. He was a ladies' man. He had all the women lined up. I learned my way with the ladies from my Uncle Ronnie. Like I said, the ladies call me T-Strokes. My Uncle Ronnie was a USDA-approved hustler. He would say catchy quotes like, "Don't chase women, chase the money and let the women chase you." He would say, "If you knew better, you would do better." He has 300 acres of land in West Virginia. He covered it with grade A hay. Now, for those who are not familiar with the selling of hay is big business. Now, if you don't believe me, just ask a good friend of mine by the name of Jay Prince, who sales hay. He owns a 1,000-acre cattle ranch just outside of Houston, Texas. He would tell you selling hay is big business. Now, keep in mind, I'm a numbers guy. I take after my grandmother on that. I did the math based off what my uncle told me. He has 300 acres, which produce 3 tons of hay every 50 days. He makes $300 per ton. He does this 250 days out of the year. So that's 3 times 300, which comes out to be 900 tons per 50 days. 50 days divided into 250 days comes out to 5. So 5 times 900 comes out to be 4,500 tons per year. 4,500 tons times $300, which comes out to be $1,350,000 a year, minus the overhead, which is cutting and hauling cost, which is a little bit of nothing when you purchase your own equipment. See what I mean when I say selling hay is big business? My Uncle Ronnie then reinvested that money into purchasing another 27 acres, which he transformed into a graveyard. He said his slogan is, "People are dying to get in." My Uncle Ronnie is a funny guy. I also ran the numbers on that as well. My uncle said he got the land for cheap. He paid around $47,000 for 27 acres. Now, that might seem like a lot of scratch for the average guy, but when you know how to work the banks or credit unions and understand how loans work, like my uncle says, it's a walk in the park or like taking candy from a baby, which we will get more into banking later. When I ran the numbers on my uncle's second master plan, the numbers look good. It all checks out. You can put in between 1,000 to 1,500 grave plots on 1 acre of land. Let's say we went with the low number. 1,000 plots per acre would come out to be 27,000 plots. My uncle said that he was thinking of charging $1,000 a plot. So that's 1,000 times 27,000, which comes out to be $27 million minus the overhead. What he paid for the property, 47 grand, and maintaining of the property, which he does himself. Now myself, I wouldn't want to own a graveyard, but seen like to me, it's big business. My uncle said it's guaranteed money, plus he could bury his family members for free. My dad could have gotten help from his family members to get out of financial debt, but every time they would offer to help, he would refuse or turn them down. My dad was the type of guy that likes to fix his own problems. I guess you could say, I got that attribute cold from him. As my dad used to say, you are what you hang around, Ted. It goes to say, birds of a feather flock together, meaning people with similar interests, personalities, or other characteristics tend to associate with each other. So if you hang around suckers, it's a high percentage, you will most likely turn out to be a sucker. My dad had another younger brother named Jim Jr. or Lil Jim. He was named after my grandfather, Big Jim. He passed away in a car crash when I was a 1-year-old. He's my cousin Katie's dad. He used to fix up hot rods and race them on dirt roads and down by the lake in West Virginia. One day he tried to beat a train and didn't make it. Now, my grandfather, Big Jim Sr., he had the same philosophy as my dad about money. He used to always say, a fool and his money are soon parted. He's been in West Virginia all his life, living on the farm. He didn't like going to the city. He said, they make too much racket. Now, for those who are not familiar with the term racket, it means noise in country slang. He used to say, Ted, don't believe everything you see on TV. At the farm, there was only one TV, and the only reason they had that one is because my grandmother made him get it, so she could watch the news station. If it wasn't for my grandmother, there would be no TV at the farm. My grandfather's philosophy on the TV was that it is an advanced vortex for bad demons to enter this world from their world. He said that when the TV was created, more demons came into this world. He goes on to say that these beings are light beings and use the human pineal gland to take over their bodies through the TV. I know, right? Quite interesting. Now it might sound crazy, but a couple years back, some Russian guys robbed a bank in America. They were on the run for 5 years before the feds caught up with them. When asked how did they know how to rob a bank so good, they said, "We learned it from watching American movies on TV. I mean, just thinking about it. TV tells people how to dress, what to eat, how to think." I remember reading an article once where John D. Rockefeller said, "I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of ignorant workers that can be exploited by greedy capitalists." As I got older, I started to realize my grandfather wasn't so crazy after all. My grandfather, Big Jim, was an out-of-the-box type of guy. Plus, he read a lot. He liked reading books and newspaper articles. My grandfather said that he was abducted by gray aliens once from the farm. He said they sat him in front of a screen and showed him the end of the world. I asked my grandfather what did they show him. He said a nuclear bomb went off in America. They blamed the Iranians. This started World War III. The USA then invade Iran. When this happens, the Russians, China, and Korea step in to help Iran against America. He said he's seen all this on a screen on the alien's ship. Can you believe that? Sounds crazy, right? My grandpa used to complain to my grandma Mary Ann about someone stealing his cows. So many of his cows were coming up missing that my grandpa thought that some untrustworthy farmer or meat poachers in town were stealing his cows in the middle of the night. So one day he decided to stay up all night and hide in the barn with his double-barrel shotgun overlooking the pasture where his cows grazed. My grandpa Big Jim said he saw a flying saucer-shaped craft pull over the pasture and suck one of his cows up through the bottom of the craft. He referred to the craft as the dang-gone thing or doggone thing. Now, for you guys who might not be familiar with the term dang-gone thing or doggone thing, it's a country slang that can have multiple meanings and can be used as a verb, noun, exclamation, or adjective. It is used to express annoyance, disappointment, surprise, or pleasure. Doggone is somewhat old-fashioned and can be used as a more polite form of damn. My grandpa went into town and complained to the sheriff that aliens from out of space were stealing his cows at night. The town sheriff laughed at him and made a joke out of it. They wrote my grandpa off as crazy. They said, "Hey Jim, you might want to cut back on the whiskey." My grandpa was frustrated that no one believed his story, that bad aliens from out of space were stealing his cows. I know, crazy, right? My grandma said that my grandfather Big Jim was the cheapest man that ever lived. He used to drive 78 miles outside of town, passing up several gas stations, just to save 2 cents a gallon on gas. He would fill up there because he said the gas was cheaper. His philosophy was if he didn't buy their gas in town, maybe they would go down on the price. Can you believe it? Just to save 2 cents a gallon. Plus, he used to complain about the gas signs. He said, on the price sign it said 9/10 of a gallon. He used to say they are beating me out of 1/10 of a gallon. My grandfather felt some type of way that some unknown person was beating everyone out of 1/10 of a gallon. Like I said, my grandpa Jim was the cheapest man that ever lived. He only owned 2 trucks his whole life. He owned a 1953 Ford F-100. When it broke down, he would just replace the part. He brought a new F-100 53 years before he passed away. The only reason he purchased that truck was because he couldn't find parts for his 1953 Ford F-100. My grandpa Jim was a hard-working man. He would get up at 5 o'clock every day like clockwork and work sunup to sundown on the farm. My grandpa Jim and my grandma Mary Ann met in New York. You see, my grandpa Jim fought in World War II. His parents passed away when he was a kid, so he was raised by his grandparents, who both passed away while he was at war. My grandpa made friends with my grandma's brother, Uncle Leonardo, who also was fighting in the war. One time when they got to go on leave for Christmas break, my grandma's brother asked my grandpa to come to New York with him for Christmas break. Since he really had no family, he went to New York with my uncle's family. This is when he and my grandma Mary Ann met. They say it was love at first sight. My grandma Mary Ann was 3 years younger than my grandpa. When the war was over, my grandpa Jim and grandma got married. My grandpa bought a farm in his hometown in West Virginia. Then he and my grandma moved down on the farm. So my grandma Mary Ann is originally from New York. My grandma's side of the family is Italian. My grandpa is Irish, so my dad is Irish and Italian. My mother is Jewish, so I'm Jewish, Italian, and Irish. Now, like I said, my Grandpa Jim worked sundown to sunup on the farm. One day he got up to go get in his tractor and didn't return for lunch. My grandma went out to check on him and he was dead from a heart attack in the tractor. When she opened the tractor door, the radio was playing Whiskey River by Willie Nelson. Whiskey River, take my mind. Don't let her memory torture me, Whiskey River. Don't run dry. You're all I've got. Take care of me. It was a sad day that day. The poor old man passed away working on his farm in his tractor. Can you believe that? My grandpa was buried on my Uncle Ronnie's new 27-acre graveyard he had just purchased. After my grandpa's funeral, my grandmother wanted my dad and my Uncle Ronnie to come help her clean off the farm. You see, my grandpa Big Jim was a hoarder. A hoarder is someone with hoarding disorder, a mental health condition that causes people to accumulate large amounts of items, often in a chaotic way, and have difficulty getting rid of them. Hoarders may feel a strong need to keep things, even if they have little or no monetary value, and may experience distress when trying to get rid of them. The clutter can make it difficult to use living spaces, such as the kitchen or bathroom, and can create tripping hazards. It can also make it difficult to leave the home quickly and safely in an emergency. The reason why my grandpa Big Jim was a hoarder is because he grew up during the time of the Great Depression. In 1929 to 1939, the Great Depression was a severe global economic downturn that affected many countries across the world. It became evident after a sharp decline in stock prices in the United States, the largest economy in the world at the time, leading to a period of economic depression. This caused my grandpa Big Jim not to trust banks as well. He used to say, "I'm not paying another guy to hold my money." The reason for this is because during the Great Depression, the banking industry was devastated, with more than 9,000 banks failing between 1930 and 1933. Many of these banks were small and had lent a large portion of their assets to speculate in the stock market. When the market crashed, these banks were essentially put out of business overnight. The lack of deposit insurance at the time meant that depositors lost all their money when a bank failed. This led to a cycle of bank runs and closings, where customers of stable banks would line up to withdraw their money when they heard about other banks failing. This fear of losing their savings often led to another bank closing. The cycle of bank runs and closings contributed to a widespread economic disaster. Meanwhile, my dad and Uncle Ronnie were helping my grandma Mary Ann clean off the farm. They came across this old barn when they opened it up. It was full of old car batteries. Seems my grandpa Big Jim had this hoarder thing with old car batteries made before 1960. He had over 4,000 batteries in this old barn. My dad and uncle were pissed off that they had to find a place to haul and dispose of over 4,000 car batteries. When they found a place to get rid of them, they made a load at the place where they took them. The guy noticed that they were all batteries from before the 1960s. Come to find out, before the 1960s they made batteries with 25 to 50 grams of silver in each battery. Can you believe that? My grandpa Big Jim hoarded over 4,000 batteries with 25 to 50 grams worth of silver in them. At the time, silver was going for about 67 cents a gram. Now let's run them numbers. Let's say we go with the low number. 4,000 batteries with 25 grams of silver each. Comes out to be 100,000 grams. 100,000 grams times 67 cents come out to be $67,000. My dad and uncle made off with 67 grand. They weren't so pissed off after that. I guess my grandpa Big Jim hoarding paid off. That's not all. Get a load of this. While my dad and uncle were cleaning out the garage, they found a hidden closet that was being blocked by an old refrigerator. When they were able to get inside, there were hundreds of Music Mountain jugs filled to the rim with coins. Pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, and silver and gold dollars. Some of the coins were worth more because of the dates on them. From what Grandma Mary said, he would sit the Music Mountain jug in the corner of the room, fill it up with coins. Some he would find on the ground, then it would disappear. My grandma said she thought he was taking them to the bank. Remember, I told you my grandpa Big Jim didn't trust banks. So every time he would fill up one of these jugs, he would stash it in that closet behind the old refrigerator in the garage. He did this for over 40 years. My uncle and dad went out and rented the biggest U-Haul they could find to haul the change off to the bank. It took them 3 trips. About time they got it all there and counted, it came out to over $217,000. Can you believe that? My grandfather Big Jim had stashed over $200,000 in change. Meanwhile, my dad and uncle were so happy they made off with close to 300 grand in cash. They forgot about another stash my grandpa Big Jim had. You see, when we were younger, me and my cousin Fat Sam used to see my grandpa Big Jim get up in the middle of the night and go outside. We wonder what he was up to, so one night we watched him through the window. He was stashing cash in mason jars and burying them underground. After my grandpa Big Jim passed away, me and my cousin Fat Sam went out and got us some metal detectors. We started scanning some of the areas where we thought our grandpa Big Jim had planted the money. The metal tops on the mason jars made them easy to find. Me and my cousin Fat Sam must have dug up over 50 mason jars, each of them having over $1,000 in them. Me and Fat Sam sat there and counted it up. It came out to be over 52 grand, which me and my cousin split down the middle. Can you believe that? Man, my granddad really didn't like banks. At 17 years old, I came up on my first 25 grand, thanks to Grandpa Big Jim. Now, after my Grandpa Big Jim passed away, my Grandma Mary Ann didn't want to live on the farm anymore, so she left my Uncle Ronnie to take over the farm, and she moved back to New York with my Aunt Sarah. She wanted to be closer to her side of the family, since they all were from New York. Truth be told, my Grandma Mary Ann really didn't like living in West Virginia on the farm. She only stayed there because of my granddad. You see, my grandma was a big Apple City type of gal. She grew up in New York her whole life until she married my grandpa. Now, this is where the story gets interesting. My Aunt Sarah is my dad's baby sister. She's my cousin Fat Sam and Logan's mom. My Aunt Sarah graduated from college in New York with her master's degree in business. Then she went out and got her real estate and brokerage licenses. I mean, this lady is a walking gold mine. My Aunt Sarah is like my secret weapon. Every time this lady calls me with a tip, it's money in the bank. My Aunt Sarah always has the inside scoop on the newest stock or real estate properties. She's the main reason I have a lot of properties in New York today. When I was just getting into the stock market game, she used to say, "It's about the dividends, Ted. It's all about the dividends." She says, "You got to play for the long haul, Ted." Dividends are payments that publicly traded companies make to shareholders. They can be paid in cash or additional shares known as stock dividends. The more shares a person owns in a company, the more they will receive when that company issues dividends. You have annual dividends, which is, if a company pays a 2% annual dividend and its shares are trading at $100, an investor with 100 shares would receive $200 annually. Then you have dividends per share, which is, if a company's board of directors issues a 5% annual dividend per share and the company's shares are worth $100, the dividend is $5. Then you have stock dividend, which is, if a company issues 5% stock dividends, it will pay 0.05 shares for every share owned by a shareholder. Then you have dividend yields, which means when some companies have higher dividend yields and are often referred to as dividend stocks. Like we said, a dividend stock is a distribution of profits by a corporation to its shareholders, after which the stock exchange decreases the price of the stock by the dividend to remove volatility. The market has no control over the stock price on open on the ex-dividend date, though often than not it may open higher. Like I said, every time my Aunt Sarah would call me with a tip, it was a guaranteed check. I remember back in October 2002, my aunt calls me with a tip. She said, "Hey, Ted, you didn't hear this from me, but there's this new stock about to go public called Netflix. If you got some extra scratch, money, laying around, you might want to put a wad of cash on this one." Netflix is a subscription-based streaming service that allows users to watch TV shows, movies, documentaries, and more on a variety of devices. At the time, I was 2 years in being a multimillionaire, so I had a lot of extra scratch laying around, if you know what I mean. Netflix was one of the first of its time. I bought $150,000 worth of shares at 34 cents a pop. Now I got over 500,000 shares. Today, it's at over $600 a share. Told you my Aunt Sarah was a gold mine. I was hitting it so big off Aunt Sarah. For her 56th birthday, I bought her a Rolls-Royce Phantom. I nicknamed her Sarah Buffett, after one of my favorite billionaires to watch, Warren Buffett. Now get a load of this. This guy is worth $145 billion. With that type of money, he can buy a whole country. My little $7 billion is a drop in the bucket for Warren Buffett. You see, Warren Buffett, he is known for making long-term investments, holding onto companies for years or even decades, and avoiding frequent trading. This approach allows him to take advantage of the power of compound interest and gives the companies he invests in time to grow and generate substantial returns. Coca-Cola is Warren Buffett's longest-held stock and one of his favorites. His holding company, Berkshire Hathaway, first bought shares of Coke stock in 1988 and owns 400 million shares. In 1988 and 1989, Warren Buffett invested over $1 billion of Berkshire Hathaway Inc. funds into shares of Coca-Cola Company. Today, Warren Buffett is recognized as one of the greatest investors of all time. He's been buying Coca-Cola shares since they were 10 cents a share. Now Coca-Cola pays out 48 cents a share every quarter. Now that might not seem like much to a guy that has 1 or 2 shares, but when you have 400 million shares times 48 cents, that comes out to be $192 million every 3 months. This dude makes almost $200 million every 3 months just off Coca-Cola. Can you believe that? We will get more into the stock market later. I called my Aunt Sarah Buffett, but her last name is Macello. Her last name was originally Strokes, but she got married to my Uncle Frank Macello. Now my Uncle Frank is a full-blooded Italian. He's my cousins Fat Sam and Logan's dad. Now when I get through telling you about my Uncle Frank, you will understand why my cousins Fat Sam and Logan act the way they did. My Uncle Frank Macello was a boss in the Macello crime family. He's a charismatic, tough guy. You see, he made his bones, making a lot of money in the stock market for all the bosses of the mafia crime families. They love my Uncle Frank because he was making them a lot of legal money. They nicknamed him Wall Street Frank. Have you ever heard of Macello's restaurant in New York and Chicago? That's owned by my Uncle Frank. Like I said, my uncle made his bones, so this means he was a made man. In the American and Sicilian mafia, a made man is a fully initiated member of the mafia. To become made, an associate first must be Italian or of Italian descent and sponsored by another made man. To become a made man, you are required to take an oath of silence called omerta. The omerta is a code of silence. It seals lips of men even in their own defense and even when the accused is innocent of charged crimes. He was a part of the Italian secret order called the Cosa Nostra, which translates to our thing or this thing of ours. My Uncle Frank was the type of guy you didn't want to call unless you had serious problems. Now, like my father, I was one who liked to take care of my problems myself, but I had some tough guys trying to extort me out of a couple $100,000. I called my Uncle Frank. I told him the situation. His words were, "Consider it done." Within 72 hours, my uncle calls me back. He said, "Hey Ted, it's your Uncle Frank. You remember that problem you had? Well, it won't be a problem anymore." Me being green, I asked him, what does he mean? He said, let's just say they sleep with the fishes. Then he hangs up. Dang, I just wanted him to have a talk with those guys, not make them disappear. Like I said, my Uncle Frank is the type of guy you don't call unless you got a serious problem. One time I had a problem with a guy who kept harassing my girlfriend at the condo we lived at. I tried talking to the guy myself, but he just wasn't getting it. My girlfriend had already told him to beat it and leave her alone. So I went to talk with my Uncle Frank about this guy. My Uncle Frank said, "Consider it done." I told my uncle, could you make sure he's not sleeping with the fishes this time? Just talk to the guy. You know, rough him up a little bit. He said, no problem, we'll take care of it. 24 hours later, I find out the guy is in the hospital on life support. Can you believe that? They beat the poor guy within a half-inch of his life. I went to go meet up with my Uncle Frank to ask him what happened. His response was, you said don't kill the guy. We didn't kill him. I said, yes, but you almost killed him. My Uncle Frank said, what can I say? Things might have gotten a little out of hand. He said, look, you said you had a problem. We took care of that problem, and that's that. He said, I don't see what all the fuss is about. That was the last time I called my Uncle Frank with a problem after that. Now, the mob or mafia are the type of guys you didn't want doing things for you. You see, the mafia works like this. If they do something for you, then at a later time, you might have to do something for them. They call it a favor for a favor. You got to be a tough guy to deal with these guys. Let's just say, this organization is not for the faint of hearts. My Uncle Frank has a brother named Tony Left Shoes. They called him Tony Left Shoes because he was born with 2 left feet. Tony Left Shoes was always getting in trouble and my Uncle Frank would have to bail him out. One time, Tony Left Shoes was dating this chick up in Brooklyn. Tony found out that another guy that lives at her apartments was nailing his chick. Tony Left Shoes approached the guy and warned him about messing with his girl. The guy told Tony Left Shoes he might want to take that up with his girl. The guy said, if the chick wants me to bang her, I'm gonna keep banging her. Man, why did the guy go out and say that? Tony Left Shoes didn't like what the guy said. So one night he waits outside the apartments until he comes out. When the guy comes out, Tony Left Shoes chases the guy 3 blocks. Now imagine a guy with 2 left feet chasing a guy 3 blocks. I know, quite the sight, right? But anyway, he chases the guy 3 blocks, then whacks the guy. Just so happened, it was right in front of a city judge's house. It was 10 o'clock at night. Just so happened the judge was getting up to drop a deuce and looked out his window. Right when Tony Left Shoes was shooting the guy in the back. Can you believe that? The judge looked him right in the face. Tony Left Shoes was arrested. I mean, he was good as gone. Come to find out, this judge had a weird thing with dogs. My Uncle Frank just so happens to get a hold of pictures of the judge in a trailer in the middle of the woods making whoopee with a police dog. Can you believe that? My uncle had connections at all the big media outlets and newspaper printers like New York Times. They threatened to put the pictures on the front page of the papers and all over the news if the judge didn't recant his statements. When it came time for the judge to testify against Tony Left Shoes, he said he never seen the guy. Can you believe that? Tony Left Shoes walks on a first-degree murder charge? Still, until this day. I don't know how my Uncle Frank got a hold of those pictures. I know, crazy, right? My Uncle Frank also has an uncle named Joey the Butcher. I can't speak much on Joey, but let's just say he's a guy that's good with his hands. Now you might be wondering why I told you about my different family members. It's because all these people play a role in who I am today. This is like the introduction to who I am. This is episode 1. My life is a long story and must be told in its entirety. On episode 2, we will go back to my childhood. We will break down some of the life lessons my Grandma Marianne and Grandpa Big Jim taught me. I picked up a little from all of these people. On episode 2, we will go more in depth about the skills I learned from playing the game Monopoly. This is to be continued. Thanks for tuning in to Young Elder TV. Be sure to hit that like button and bell. Be sure to subscribe for more videos from me, Ted Strokes the Billionaire. In the future on the Young Elders channel, I will be doing stock market picks, investment tips, and real estate advice. Also, this lecture is a series, so stay tuned in. I'm Ted, the Billionaire, signing out. Peace.